A very good morning, children. I, Tanima Seth, your English teacher, hope you all are doing well. From the previous session, you've learned that the bacteriologist has a visitor in his laboratory to whom he displays the living bacteria, the bottled cholera. And you've also noticed that the visitor, as he has been described as the pale-faced man, was quite interested to see a living bacteria, and it was on his demand that the bacteriologist shows him the bottled cholera, and he also explained its vast potential of destruction. But the bacteriologist leaves the visitor or the anarchist all alone by himself in the laboratory for a moment as he gets a call from his wife. So the visitor grabs the opportunity, or you can say that of course he takes advantage of this opportunity and steals the vial tube which contained the cholera germ. Now let's read further to find the upcoming twist in the story. Alright. When he re-entered the laboratory, his visitor was looking at his watch. "I had no idea I had wasted an hour of your time," he said. 12 minutes to 4. I ought to have left here by 3:30. But your things were really too interesting. No, positively I cannot stop a moment longer. I have an engagement at 4. Now, of course, the bacteriologist, after attending to the call of his wife, he happens to re-enter the laboratory. And he sees that, of course, the visitor was looking at his watch, and he says to him, to the bacteriologist, that he has now, wasted a lot of time of the bacteriologist. He was there, for 1 hour, and he had to leave by 3:30 itself. But his things, that is, the bacteriologist was showing him many things, of course, many great inventions or discoveries of the bacteriologist, and he got so occupied in all these things that he didn't realize that how much time has passed. And he also has an appointment at 4 o'clock. Engagement over here means that he has an appointment somewhere else at 4 o'clock. So now he has to leave the laboratory. Now, of course, the bacteriologist didn't know at that time he didn't know that with what intention the visitor has come to his laboratory. So of course he got the advantage of the absence of the bacteriologist from the laboratory, and of course he grabbed this opportunity. He had stolen the vial, and now he is already or you can say that he is preparing himself to just leave the lab before the bacteriologist recollects about the bottled cholera. He passed out of the room repeating his thanks, and the bacteriologist accompanied him to the door and then returned thoughtfully along the passage to his laboratory. How he glotted on those cultivations of disease germs. Now, of course, he had passed out of the room. He was repeating his thanks again and again. The visitor was thanking him, and the bacteriologist also accompanied him till the door. And then, after leaving him till the door, of course, the visitor had gone. And then when he was returning back into his laboratory, he was there in the passage to his laboratory. He was thinking that how glotted the visitor was when he saw the cultivations of disease germs. cultivations, that is growing in number, live. Okay, they were not dead, rather they were alive, they were growing, they were multiplying. So how happy he was to see them. A disturbing thought struck him, but now came a disturbing thought. The disturbing thought that where was the vial? Where was the bottled cholera? He turned to the bench by the vapor bath and then very quickly to his writing table. So, of course, first he turned towards the bench by the steam bath, and then he also searched for it towards the in the near or around the writing table. Then he felt hastily in his pockets. Then he quickly checked his pockets, but he didn't find anywhere, and then he rushed to the door. I may have put it down on the hall table, he said. That it can be that he had moved out of the laboratory twice. Once when his wife gave him a call, and second time when he had to see this off, I mean the visitor off. Then of course it might be that he had kept it on the hall table, but he even didn't find there. So of course this was the disturbing thought, that the visitor had, it might be that the visitor had stolen it. Minnie, he shouted hoarsely in the hall. Hoarsely, that is in a very rough voice. He shouted for his wife. Minnie, yes dear, came a distant voice. Had I anything in my hand when I spoke to you, dear, just now? And then he took a pause for her to answer. So of course he asked her that, did you see anything in my hand when I was speaking to you? Nothing, dear, because I remember. So she answered that, no, I remember very clearly that there was nothing in your hands. You were not carrying anything in your hand. Then of course, when she said this, he realized it quickly that the visitor was an anarchist and he had happened to steal the tube from his laboratory. Blue ruin. Blue ruin is an expression actually to describe complete destructions. It means complete destruction. He knew that of course now he has taken it, and now he would use it against the people of the London, against the government of London. Complete destruction, cried the bacteriologist, and immediately ran to the front door and down the steps of his house to the street. So when he realized that of course this is the case, he realized the seriousness, he realized the gravity, he quickly ran to the front door. He also went down the steps of his house, and he was there in the street. Minnie, hearing the door slam violently, ran in alarm to the window. Now of course, when she heard that the bacteriologist had just shut the main door loudly, so she was of course shocked to hear such a voice, and in shock, in surprise, she just rushed towards the window to look out in the street that what has actually happened. Down the street, a slender man was getting into a cab. What did she see there? That of course a slender, that is a thin, slim, skinny man was getting into the cab. The bacteriologist, hatless, that is without the hat, and in his carpet slippers, that are soft slippers, was running and gesticulating wildly towards this group. And what did the bacteriologist was doing? He was, of course, he didn't realize that in what condition he was. He was without the hat. He was only in his soft slippers, and he was just running, making gestures towards the group. One slipper came off, but he did not wait for it. So of course, while he was running, while he was chasing the visitor, one of his slippers came off, but of course he didn't wait to get it on, rather he ran after him. He has gone mad, said Minnie. It's that horrid signs of his. So of course Minnie says that this person, he says it, she has actually said it for her husband, that of course he has gone mad. I know that as she realizes it quickly, that of course it would have been a result of because of the hateful signs of his. So it is a consequence. It is only the effect of this hateful, the horrid signs of his, that he is running in such manner. The slender man pointed hastily to the bacteriologist, said something to the cabman. The apron of the cab slammed. The whip swished, the horse's feet clattered, and in a moment the cab, with the bacteriologist hotly in pursuit, had receded up the vista of the roadway and disappeared round the corner. Pursuit over here means chase. When one happens to, when one happens to run after someone to catch him or her, had receded up the vista. Vista means a pleasing view of the roadway. So by the time he was running after him, of course, this man, the visitor, the pale faced man, the slender man, he had already called for the cab and he was saying something to the cabman. He, of course, pointed, while he was saying something to the cabman, he quickly pointed out to the bacteriologist. He indicated to the cabman that, of course, he had to, drive really quickly so that he could be away, so that the bacteriologists do not happen to catch him. He quickly got inside the cab. He shut the door of the cab. The whip swished, that is the whip that the cabman used so that he could, of course, instruct the horses to speeden up. The horses' feet clattered, and in a moment, the cab with the bacteriologist hotly in pursuit had receded up the vista of the roadway and disappeared round the corner. But of course, the bacteriologist was running after the cab. He was running in chase of the visitor, but very quickly the cab, in a great speed, it receded. It moved further up the pleasing view of the roadway and disappeared round the corner. Minnie hastily put her bonnet on. Bonnet is actually the a hat that is of which the strap is tied under the chin. So of course she quickly put her hat on, seized his shoes. Seized means take hold of something, suddenly. So she just grabbed the bacteriologist's shoes, went into the hall, took down his hat. She also took his hat and his light overcoat from the pegs. Pegs is a hook, okay? And the light overcoat of the scientist, of the bacteriologist, was already hanging on the peg or on the hook. So she also took his coat from there, emerged upon the doorstep. Of course, she moved further down the doorstep, and there she was there in the street. Hailed a cab. Hailed means she gave a call. She called a cab that luckily crawled by. Of course, she was lucky enough that the moment she happened to step into the street, she was able to sight a cab. She called for it, and the cab came immediately. And she instructed the cab driver, drive me up the road and round Havelock Crescent and see if we can find a gentleman running about in a velveteen coat and no hat. So of course she instructed the cabman, the cab driver, to drive her up the road round Havelock Crescent, and she had told him to see for a man who would have been running in his velvet coat and with no hat. The man in the foremost cab, foremost over here means the leading cab, all right, referring to the cab of the visitor, okay, the pale-faced man or the anarchist. So the leading cab in this leading cab was the visitor, the anarchist. He sat crouched in the corner, his arms tightly folded, and the little tube that contained such vast possibilities of destruction gripped in his hand. So in the leading cab, this anarchist was sitting crouched in the corner of this seat. He had tightly, folded his arms, and he was, of course, in his hands he was carrying the little tube that he had stolen from the laboratory of the bacteriologist. And what did it contain? It consisted of the bottled cholera, which could, of course, destroy the entire city of London. He had only to make sure of the water supply and break the little tube into a reservoir. A reservoir is a large natural or artificial lake which is used as a water supply. So now he was successful in his first plan. He was able to steal the cholera very successfully from the laboratory of the bacteriologist. Now he has to only make sure of the water supply. He had to reach the water supply and break that little tube into the water supply. How brilliantly he had planned it, forged the letter of introduction. Forged, that is, he had actually faked. He had, brought a fake letter of introduction to the bacteriologist so that he could get into the laboratory. And how brilliantly he had seized his opportunity. And of course, he was looking for the opportune time so that, he can grab this opportunity and steal. And when, of course, the bacteriologist was away from the laboratory for some time, so that he could attend to his wife's call, he took the advantage of the situation, and he had stolen it from the uh, laboratory. He craned out of the cab. Now, of course, craned over here means that he's just, took out his neck out of the cab's window so that he could see where the bacteriologist was. The bacteriologist was scarcely 50 yards behind. That was bad. He would be caught and stopped yet. So, of course, when he happened to stretch his neck out of the cab to have a vision of this bacteriologist who was chasing him, he saw that, of course, he was hardly 50 yards behind him, and it was really bad because then he would be able to catch and stop him. The cab swayed, and the anarchist, half standing under the trap, put the hand containing the little glass tube upon the apron to preserve his balance. So now, as the cabman, he was, very, he was in a great speed. So what happened, that the cab happened to sway. It was moving from, here and there. So of course, what happened, that the anarchist, to preserve, the tube, so that so that he could, the tube doesn't break. All right, it does not happen to break. So to protect this, to preserve this, what happened, he quickly half stood in the cab, and he put his hand, which of course in that hand he was carrying the little glass tube in which it was, of course, the cholera germ. He had put it on the put his hand on the apron, on the door of the this cab, so that he could maintain the balance. But of course he had done so, but it was of no use, because he felt the brittle thing crack. Brittle, that is something which is hard. Of course, the test tube is hard, but it is liable to break easily. So of course he felt that, though he had taken the precaution, though he was trying to maintain the balance, but the tube had broken, and the broken half of it rang upon the floor of the cab. And what happened, the bacteria that was there inside the tube, half of it just fell on the floor of the cab. He fell back into the seat with a curse and stared dismally, that is cheerlessly, gloomily, unhappily, at the 2 or 3 drops of moisture on the apron. So of course now he knew, he got really saddened, he felt disappointed. When he fell back into the seat, he was really disappointed that he had worked, so hard to steal that vial from the laboratory of the bacteriologist. But what has happened? It had actually broken, and now they were and he was, just staring cheerlessly, unhappily, at the 2 or 3 drops of that cholera moisture that was there on the apron, that is the door of the cab. As you can see it over here, he had put his hand on the apron, on the door of the cab, so that he could maintain the balance. So it was there, on the edge of that you can say window or the door of the cab, that the 2 or 3 moisture of this germ was there, and the half of it had already fallen on the floor of the cab. All right. He shuddered. Now, of course, he got disappointed. He shuddered, he trembled, shivered. Well, I suppose I shall be the first. So what he thought? He thought that, of course, now he would be the first person who, would have been infected by this cholera germ. So now he has become a human carrier of the germ. So he would die of the germ itself, the bacteria itself. So he will be the first person now. A little drop was still in the broken end of the tube, and he drank that to make sure. It was better to make sure, but now he changed his mind. What happened? A little drop was still, left in the broken tube. And what he did? He drank that to make sure. Make sure of what? That now he had become a human carrier, a human vector. Now, of course, he would infect the others. Then it dawned upon him that there was no further need to escape the bacteriologist. Now, what came to his mind? That, of course, now he has become a human vector, a human carrier. So now there is no need to run or to escape from the bacteriologist. He was running after that stolen tube. Now it is of no use, because the tube had got broken already. Half of it has been wasted, and the leftover thing, he had already consumed it. So now it is of no use that he should try to escape from him. In Wellington Street, he told the cabman to stop and got out. He stood on the pavement with his arms folded upon his breast, awaiting the arrival of the bacteriologist. So he asked the cabman in the Wellington Street to stop the cab. He got out of it, and he was standing on the footpath with his arms folded. He was waiting for the bacteriologist to arrive. Vive anarchy, you are too late, my friend. I have drunk it. The cholera is brought. And he says it, he declares, he announced it to the bacteriologist. Vive anarchy. Vive, that is long live anarchy, and that you are too late to come. I have already drunk the cholera germ, and now it is brought. It is brought that now it is, of course, multiplying. It will grow in me, and I will infect the others. The bacteriologist from his cab beamed curiously at him through his spectacles. So he was just, the bacteriologist was looking at the anarchist curiously. Okay, he was staring through his spectacles. You have drunk it, an anarchist? See now. He was about to say something more and then checked himself. But now what happened? As he was, he said it to him that, what, you've drunk it, you are an anarchist, see now, I see now, that is, I'll see you now. But he was then about to say something more. But before that, he stopped himself, he checked himself, because he had noticed something about, the anarchist. Now, what is it? That we'll come to know now. A smile hung in the corner of his mouth. He opened the apron of his cab as if to descend, at which the anarchist waved him a dramatic farewell and strode off towards Waterloo Bridge, carefully jostling his infected body against as many people as possible. So now the bacteriologist happened to notice something, all right, and he just had a smile on his face. He opened the gate of his cab, and as he was coming out of it, the moment the anarchist saw that, of course, he would come down and he would be again, chasing him, the anarchist just waved him a farewell, waved him a bye, and he just took a stride off from there. He was running in long steps. He took long steps to, move away from the anarchist, and he moved towards the Waterloo Bridge, and intentionally he was pushing, roughly his infected body against as many people as possible, so that he could infect them all. The bacteriologist was so preoccupied with the vision of him that he scarcely showed the slightest surprise at the appearance of Minnie upon the pavement with his hat and shoes and overcoat. So the bacteriologist was all, his mind was all occupied with the vision of this anarchist. What was he doing? That he had hardly noticed the appearance of his wife Minnie upon the footpath, and of course she had come with his hat and shoes and overcoat. So of course he appreciates her for doing so. Very good of you to bring my things, he said, and remained lost in contemplation of the receding figure of the anarchist. Contemplation, that is the act of looking at something for long and with deep thought. So of course he appreciates her for bringing his things, but of course again he got lost in the deep thought of the receding figure. Receding, that is the figure of the anarchist which was moving away from him towards the Waterloo Bridge. "You had better get in," he said, still staring. "Put on my shoes, certainly, dear," said he. So, of course, he asked his wife to get into the cab, and then he asked her to put on his shoes, and then again he got lost seeing, or observing the anarchist. "You see," now he is telling to his wife, "you see, that man came to my house to see me, and he is an anarchist. No, don't faint, or I cannot possibly tell you the rest." So now he happens to unfold the main, twist comes over here. He is unfolding the things. So he tells his wife that, of course, "Can you see that man? He came to my house to see me, and later I realized that, of course, he is an anarchist." And hearing this, of course, the wife was about to faint, but he asks her not to faint, or otherwise he won't be able to tell her the rest of the story. "And I wanted to astonish him, not knowing he was an anarchist, and took up a cultivation of that new species of bacterium I was telling you of, that infest, that is, infest means the bacteria which is present, or which can multiply in, numerous number. I think caused the blue patches upon various monkeys, and like a fool I said it was Asiatic cholera." So, of course, now he tells his wife that this man happened to enter my laboratory, and I was boasting off about my discoveries, about my inventions, and in that, boastfulness of his, he happened to display, a cultivation of the new species of bacterium that he had discovered, that he had prepared, the effect of which is only to cause the blue patches upon the various monkeys on which he had made this preparation, this new bacteria, and he had already experimented it on the monkeys, which the effect of which was only that it had happened to cause the skin of the monkey turn blue. And while he was displaying so, he mistook that new bacteria to be the bottled cholera, and he had displayed it in front of this anarchist, and he called it the Asiatic cholera, and he ran away with it to poison the water of London, and he certainly might have made things look blue for this civilized city. But what happened now? Of course, he had run away with it to poison the water of London, because he is still under the impression, that is, the anarchist is still under the impression that, of course, it is the bottled cholera, with which, of course, he can bring destruction to the entire city of London. And now he has swallowed it, he has consumed it. Of course, I cannot say what will happen. Now, of course, the bacteriologist says that, of course, he doesn't know that what will happen, what could be the probabilities, whether just the man would get infected, or whether it would, of course, spread among others as well. I cannot say what will happen, but it turned that kitten blue, and the 3 puppies in patches, and the sparrow bright blue. But of course, he again reminds his wife that by experimenting this new species of bacterium on the monkeys, on the kitten, on the puppies, on the sparrow, it had turned them bright blue. But the bother that is now the trouble to him is, the inconvenience for him is, that he has to again take all the troubles, or he has to make all the efforts in preparing the new bacterium again. But the bother is, I shall have all the trouble and expense of preparing some more. So this is the actual twist that I was talking about. Of course, the bacteriologist recollected that the vial did not contain cholera, but a strange new microbe that the bacteriologist had been studying, had made and experimented on various animals, the only known effect of which is to make the skin turn bright blue. So the bacteriologist returns home with his wife, complaining that he would now have to prepare the new bacterium again. So this is how this curious tale ends. So children, I now end the session here. Go through the explanation again, read the story, I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, children. Bye bye.